Hello, beautiful people. What is going on? If you can hear me and see me all right, let me know. Put it in the chat so I can make sure you all can hear me. And actually, how about this? Tell me how many workflow sessions you have attended so far. Okay. If it's just three, five, 10, all of them, just one. All right. About five, three. I have attended six, two. Awesome. 7 sessions so far. You guys are rock stars. You're really getting the most out of your workflow session, I am sure. Uh, Excited about the topic of today. We have a little poll that we want to start with to get a sense of the familiarity that you guys have with custom automations. Just as a way for me to calibrate my language as I go throughout for the people in the audience today. So I'll be publishing the poll right now that will ask, how familiar are you with automation? And it will rank you there from advanced, intermediate, beginner, or maybe even below beginner, square one. This is like your first exposure to this topic at all. All right, I see some people voting in, vote in, and we'll see what the results suggest. Good stuff. I see beginners winning with 57%. 60% now, and then below beginner another 20%. So look, we have an 80-20, which is about what I expected. 20% of people that they've done this before, they've built some automations of their own. They know, you can talk to them a little bit about Zap you're making, like what that actually is in the first place, and some of the things you can do with it. But the vast majority seem like they're starting. Uh, they are a little bit early in their journey, which is totally fine. My hope today is to share some use cases that actually have come across our desk because we do this for a living. We are an agency that provide custom automation services for accounting firms and start to get you thinking about what's possible. All right. I'm sure many of you will have questions or thoughts as we go on. And by the way, I can show this in the screen, so check it out. Here it is, 70% beginner, 20% below beginner, and about 18% intermediate or advanced. That's excellent. All right, so I will share my screen now. There you go, there it is. And let's get started. 10 custom automations that save 10 plus hours per week. The mic is awful, muffled. Let me actually try this. Let's see. Is that better now? It might have been the fan. I might turn it on again because it might get hot, but hopefully that helps you guys listen to me a little better. All right, let's go. So who am I? Just let's get started with who is this guy talking today and why you should listen to me when it comes to custom automation. My name is Isaac Perdomo from Opzer.co, and I'm the founder of the automation agency that serves accounting firms. My dad was an accountant, and from a very young age, I got to see really how manual work can be at the time, which is pushing a lot of papers, right? So we set out to change that and focus exclusively on working with accounting firms back in 2023, have served over 100 firms since, and haven't looked back. We built automation systems that save firms hundreds of hours a year. But I'm excited today to share with you what are some examples of that. Darren said it's moved the proximity. When you move back, you fade perfect. I'll try to stand still. I'm excited, so that's what I'm moving around, but I try to stand still then for you guys to listen to me a little bit more closely. Perfect. Actually, I'll turn my fan back on because it's getting hot around here. All right, so every automation, as we saw in our sub-headline of the title today, should tie back to one of three outcomes. Either giving you time back, reducing errors, or expanding your margins. And we're gonna see some examples of each today. So as you think about a use case that you might want to use in your firm, think about what's the most tangible pain or problem you want to solve internally. Is it that you want to do more with your existing team? Is it that you don't feel as confident in the data and the deliverables that you're sending out to your clients and the quality of that? Or is it more of a profitability that you want to expand? Okay. Um, as we go on, because we have a little bit of a mix, I want to share not only some quick wins of like, hey, these are things that you could set up relatively easily, but some more complex systems for my intermediate people as well, that they can start to see, oh, maybe I want to do that. And by the way, for my beginner people as well, to know what's possible for them further down the road. And here are the 10 use cases that we'll be walking through together today. We'll talk about new client onboarding, invoice reconciliations, automated journal entries, new tax client questionnaires, questionnaires completed to prepare ready. Those are some of the automations that I'll be talking about that are a little bit simpler in nature. And the 5 complex ones are customized profitability dashboards, AI coded on categorized transactions, fixed assets reconciliation, bad coding finders, and financial statement AI reviewer. Let me know in the comments, is there any particular one you're excited about? Let's see. We'll see if we have time to go through them all, which I hope we do. I'll be alternating. I'll be doing like a quick one and a complex one just to mix it up a little bit. Love to see new client onboarding as one, new tax client questionnaire, excellent. And I put new client onboarding as first because it's such a common use case that we see. So let's get into it. New client onboarding. What's the problem we're solving here? When a new client comes into your firm, you have to key in a lot of data, whether it is in financial sense, in another project management tool you use, in an Excel you use to list out your clients that nobody knows you use, but you use that internally for your own sake. On a billing platform, a CRM, you have to create a folder. Like there's so many places where you have to enter in client data when they come in as a firm. And by the way, when their data changes in the future as well. So that can create sometimes inconsistent records because you have a client name here and a slightly different one there with a comma here, with LLC here, without LLC there. And that can cause some issues further down the road as we try to build some sort of reporting, which actually it's the next use case we'll talk about today. There are steps that could be missed during the client onboarding process. What's worse than actually promising something to a client and then that project being missed, right? Or maybe not that big of a deal, but templates not being applied properly, kickoffs not being scheduled, invoices slipping through the cracks and not being set up at the right time, you not having that ability to get that cash flow as early as you should have. And of course, risking mistakes by doing everything manually, potentially having wrong naming here, wrong access layers, and creating some of the issues further down the road. Now, what's the solution? The solution is creating a custom automation that from one trigger asks your client everywhere. And it properly names everything that needs to be named. It uses the appropriate templates everywhere they need to be used. And it does everything based specifically on the services they bought. Now, what are some examples of things that we typically see firms use as the trigger event to trigger this automation? Some examples might be when a proposal is signed. If you're using a proposal software like a billing, the billing tools within financial sense, or maybe when the first deposit is paid. This could potentially be if you're using a CRM, moving that CRM just to indicate that you've won it. If the data is leaving there and you already have a CRM or client relationship management software in place. It could also be a form that you've created to enable you to edit or confirm the data is correct before you submit it, and then that sends it out to all of your systems. And when I say all of your systems, what do I mean? These are some examples. Imagine that the moment the client signs that proposal, you move that deal, and you know you closed maybe a monthly accounting service, a quarterly tax estimates, a yearly return, and maybe payroll that's going to be scheduled every other week. You could have all those projects created, that client created, and those projects have the right person that has to do them, the right budgets, the right recurring cadences, which might be different from service to service, right? And to create the accounting, and now the accounting manager is assigned, and You have the monthly recurring basis right from the get-go. What a beauty, right? Making sure all that setup is done from the get-go, and you don't have to worry about whether we capture what we need to do for the client because you know it will be there. What are some other examples? Maybe creating creating the client in your billing or accounting system, whether it is QuickBooks, Xero, or anything else. Creating the customer and the recurrent invoice to make sure that you get paid for the work you're doing, for the hard work you're putting in. The CRM itself, there may be some data that you want to send there to suggest that, hey, this person is now a client, and who's the owner of that relationship, and when is their renewal date. So potentially, as that renewal date comes up, you can set up things to follow up with that client a week, 2 weeks, a month beforehand to see if their needs have changed from the conversation you had when you brought them on in the first place, and have some like pricing conversations at that point. Documents, again, another thing we see a lot of, like that client came in and now you want to create, the folder within the tax department with the client folder, and within that folder you want one folder for each year, and within each year you want several folders as well, whether that is the tax return and the source documents and the accounting files, and making sure that, again, the moment that client signs, all of that is created for you without you having to lift the finger. For some people as well, this is not maybe not applicable for everyone, but if you're using or communicating clients via Slack or Teams, creating that private channel the moment they sign up, creating it with their client name, posting some welcome messages there, or sending a welcome email that includes all the key links you need to move that relationship forward. And things as well like creating the password vault or password manager folder within the tools you use to keep track of your password securely, and much, much more. This is just some examples of things we see. I would love to hear if that aligns with what you guys were hoping for as it relates to client onboarding automations, because I saw a lot of people, Darren, Jamie, um, Alejandro, talk about client onboarding as one of the things they wanted to look at. All right, let's move on to the next use case we have, which is customized effective hourly rate dashboards or profitability dashboards. What's the problem? You might be losing money on some clients and not know it. And the best way we found to get insight into profitability by client specifically is by merging revenue data and time data to get a sense of what are the effective hourly rates you have by client. The problem, however, is that you might be using financials or another system for time, but not for billing. So now you have the time data set on one app and the billing data on another. Could also be the other way around, where you have the billing data on one platform and the time on another. And that's where integration can come into the rescue. Because now those two data sets that were siloed before, you can join them in. And essentially, as we'll see, create a view that marries both time and billing and allows you to track metrics like the following. Effective hourly rates, as we mentioned, revenue divided by the hours that were invested into that client specifically. If you start to now get the cost of each of those hours for your team and associate like a direct labor cost to that client, you can start to get fancy and calculate what the gross profit or estimated gross profit would be and what the gross profit percentage would be. And now you can rank clients from top to worst, or from most to least profitable as a result of having that data available. You can do the same for services as well and look at that and in time frame for any subset of clients as needed. And even look at your highest producing or most efficient team members as well. And because I like visuals, let's see an example. This is a dashboard that we recently built for a client. And as you can see, they are keeping track of not only revenue, but also WIP or realization. You can see their direct delivery cost, and you can see a color-coded column for the gross margin percentage for them to see if they are hitting their margin targets or not. You can also see tracked and budget hours, so they can see like for which clients are we off, and for effectively how much of the surplus or deficit in our estimated time that we expected to invest in them, we are investing in them essentially. This is another example. In this particular case, you can see a couple of other metrics, right? This can be customized for the needs of the firm, where this firm wanted to keep track of not only effective rates, hourly rates, as well as and margin, but how much offshore talent was investing time into that client, and how much onshore talent was investing time into that client, and see that at a client by client level, and have some targets internally, and have those conversations with the team on a regular basis to show this. I do want to show you a live version. Let me see if I can briefly reshare my screen, because we have a little bit of a more interactive demo to share. This is a simpler version that we have available and that we can demo, because it doesn't have any client-sensitive data. And as you can see here, I have a couple of things I can do. I can customize the date range. I can see all clients lists. I can order the clients here by effective hourly rates. And you'll notice that I also have the trend of what the average hourly rate by month looks like. I can also select a series of clients, because this is an issue that we find as well. Maybe you have a client that has 3 entities, and only one of the 3 entities is the one you're billing, but then you're tracking time for all 3 separately. Making sure that now you have the ability to select those 3 clients that you know are the same client as a group, and be able to see what their profitability looks like today and has looked like over time. All right, so just wanted to share that briefly there as an example of what that dashboard could look like. And that's the first long or complex win. All right, let's talk about invoice reconciliation. I believe someone mentioned that as one that they wanted to look at. In this particular example, it's a specific use case that came our way for a firm that was using Xero and Stripe. The challenge they face is that Xero had a native integration with Stripe, and it synced transactions, but it did not sync invoices which they needed to do their monthly process. So this firm was manually reconciling invoices from Stripe to Xero for several clients. Now, what was the solution? Creating an automated workflow that makes that reconciliation hands-free, and that looked at the details, right? The tax rates were matched properly, the currencies were converted when needed, and all the line items were exactly like the firm wanted them to be. Right? You separate in the Stripe fees because those needs to be allocated into different accounts, which sometimes some tools that they had tested in the market or in the marketplace didn't have that exactly the way he wanted it. And this is what that automation looked like. For those of you not familiar, what we're looking at here is a scenario within make.com. Scenario is what that particular company calls an automation. And it's a very similar tool to Zapier, for those of you that are a little bit more familiar with that. But fundamentally, it is a visual way to see a series of steps within different applications, and for you to customize what that workflow or automated workflow looks like and what you want it to do. Carl, good to see you. So in this particular example, I'll just walk you through so you can start to get an understanding of what this actually does. The first step is watching for events, so that when a new invoice comes in, this is triggered instantly, indicated by the little lighting right there. From there, we're retrieving the invoice so that we have more details. And then you can see that I'm searching for all the tax rates in Xero. And this is effectively a way that I'm preparing to format the data in a way that Xero ultimately will be able to receive it when I want to create the invoice at the end. These other bubbles here, and you see that they are highlighted, essentially I'm giving it all the line items from Stripe so that I can separate them out and then format them again in a format that Xero is going to accept. And here we just have a little bit of a bubble that effectively allows to route, hence the name router, different paths to say, hey, depending on the currency, you might have to convert the currency first, so that then you can populate the invoice that now has the right tax rate, the right line items, and the right currency. Or if the currency in this particular case is the same of the account, you can just post that invoice directly. Perfect. What was the website? Make.com and Zapier. Those are the two most common tools in the space. We regularly also see a lot of firms doing a lot of work, and we've done work with Power Automate. For my people that are in Microsoft ecosystems already, you might already have access to that. There's some limitations, but they can be a good starting point. And there's also another tool called N8N, literally the letter N, the number 8, and then another N. That's gaining a lot of popularity, and that we are working with some clients as well. So great questions. Let's talk about the long wing number 2, AI coded uncategorized transactions. What's the problem? This is a firm that came to us, and this particular firm was working with musicians. These are people that travel all over the world, right? They might be in California today, and then they might be in Europe, then they might be in Asia, then they might be in China. Who knows? So really, the idea of them being able to gain efficiencies through bank rules was ridiculous. It's like it's always a new vendor every time. Vendors are not the same. So they couldn't leverage rules to gain some efficiencies on the coding and on the categorizing transactions. So what was the solution? In this case, we built an automated workflow, seeing a pattern, right? That in this case went into Xero, got all your transactions, used AI, and we provided AI a prompt to determine the accounts and the appropriate tax rates for that particular transaction, for that particular client, and push that data to Xero for a human to review and easily match. Again, because I like to show and not just tell, here's what that automation looks like. You can see it's a little bit more complex. It's had a couple more moving pieces, but I'll simplify for you so you can at least understand what it is doing. The very first step that you see in this automation is getting all the clients, right? We have to tell the automation in some way for which client does this workflow apply. And just simply envision 2 columns, client name. In this case, we actually needed 3 columns. Client, the ID on Xero, and then does this AI process applies or not, and just a checkbox. So that then we can say, pull all the clients that this process applies for. Now, the following 8 steps are effectively getting us those uncategorized transactions. If you take a deeper look, I know it's be a little hard to read, but the first step here is getting the accounts, and then we are making sure we're filtering out the accounts that are not relevant, like liability accounts, equity accounts that we're not going to have transactions there. Then we get all the bank accounts that we need, and this little bubble is essentially saying, hey, give me all those transactions and I'll separate them out, right? So this is effectively allowing us to run this process for each client, for each account. And this step here is getting the bank statement report, and we are able to go through transaction by transaction and say, has this been coded or not? So at the very end of this process, we are getting for all clients, for all their relevant accounts, and for all the transactions, the one that haven't been coded yet. From there, you see 2 ChatGPT or OpenAI steps. The first one is the one that's getting, has the prompt where we'll be able to get the category, get the tax rate, get the vendor. And then the other one is simply structuring that data in a way that Xero, in the next steps, is able to accept it. And that's essentially what that last step is all about, just creating that transaction. In this case, because the transaction needs a contact associated with it, what we actually had to do is effectively search for the contact first, so that if the contact exists, we don't create it again and just follow through this process. Or we go through the other workflow, sort of the other path, and actually create the contact as it doesn't exist and create a transaction as a result. Does that make sense? Again, not hoping that people will be able to replicate it, but it started to give you a think about, oh, this is possible. As long as I can get the data, which I can, and pass it through AI, which you might be doing manually, or maybe your team members are doing manually, I can go ahead and pull that data and do what I have to do with it. All right, let's keep going. Quick win number 3, automated journal entries. There are so many journal entries being put manually in this world. that shouldn't be, because more often than not, that's a very clear, very um, rule-based thing that you can create if you think about it hard enough. We've done many journal entries automations for things like self-tax, for things like mileage, for depreciation, for payroll, and many other areas that need it. Again, the solution here in this example, I'll share one with self-tax in particular, where you need to, in this example, what is the human input? A simple form to provide a sales tax report. Then AI extracts the key value from that document and creates a journal entry in either Xero or QuickBooks in the way the firm wants it to be. Um, so here we have an example. Let's just say we have a sales tax report. We're going to provide it into a system. In this case, this firm was using Airtable. For those of you not familiar with the platform, Airtable is like a spreadsheet on steroids. It's what people call it. It's a spreadsheet-like tool, but that has some additional powers. For example, here, the feature we were able to leverage or use, it's a column that's powered by AI. So in this case, I can literally say it, hey, find the sales tax number that's typically in the bottom right corner of the document. I give it access to the document, and will extract it for me. And then from there, we use make.com to then, now that we have the value and it has been confirmed, push that manual journal entry into our accounting software of choice. And in this case, reflect that back to Airtable so we know that that occurred and that that automation ran successfully. So that's just another example of things you could do as it relates to journal entries. And again, we've seen so many variations of this, whether it's a payroll report that you have to create allocations by department, by classes, and you have to 200 journal lines. We've seen many big ones like that. Being able to perform that process as automatically as possible. Typically only requiring the input from the human, which is some sort of report or document. All right, so let's talk about the other complex or long one, which is fixed assets reconciliation. I know some of you might serve service businesses that maybe they don't have a lot of fixed assets on their books, so that wouldn't apply, but the same concept can be helpful for you to understand what's possible. So this US-based firm in this case, wanted to catch discrepancies between the fixed assets module in their client's Xero account and their balance sheet, because those are like different things and they're not always tied out. She often found differences on year end when doing taxes, especially between cash and accrual, and she wanted a system to proactively find those differences every month and raise that up to her, rather than her having to go into each individual file for each individual client to find out which ones might need attention. So the solution here was, as we've been talking about, in this case, a little bit of a table, ultimately that's going to pull what sets Xero in the fixed assets module, what says the balance sheet in cash, what says the balance sheet in accrual, so that she doesn't have to go in to figure that out. And just in one view, she can see, hey, out of your 70 clients, out of your 100 clients, only 10 and only these 37 assets for those 10 clients have some sort of significant difference. And then she can go in or assign a team member to correct those. Now, what does the process for this look like? Again, a little bit more of a complex, and actually we needed to build 2 automations to be able to perform this process. I'm not going into the details on this one, but the one at the top, it's essentially going in, and for all clients, that's the first step, similar to the last one we saw, so to the one we saw prior. And then essentially it's getting within Xero all the assets, when they were registered, when they were disposed, and it's pulling all that data in for all clients into one view. And then from there, it's essentially, we have a separate automation that's pulling that data that was provided at the top, that came from the fixed assets module in Xero, and getting the balance sheet, which is the second step right here. And then we do some automation magic to essentially be able to compare specifically from the balance sheet, what are the line items that relate to fixed assets, extract those specifically, add up those values and compare them to what we have in fixed assets so that ultimately she gets an email that says, hey, we found for 7 clients that there's this difference in their account as it relates to their fixed assets, just like we saw here. And just to give you a sense of like what problem this solved, so as I know it can be a little bit like fuzzy, like, okay, I see all these bubbles, I don't understand like what they do. This is the feedback we got from that client after we ran that process for the first time. Okay, so she said, this is a really good test and has uncovered some things that in this case, the accounting software didn't find. Specifically, the accrual basis for the balance sheet says that everything's matching up and there are no problems. However, as I did this test, now I can see that they don't balance because when you dispose an asset, it only does it in the accrual basis. It doesn't do it on the cash basis. So you had to like, she literally had records dating back to 2020 that needed to be reconciled and fixed. And she suggested also, I assume about a third of the clients have this problem. So that's one of the example automations where is there like a time being saved technically? Because this could lead to issues from down the road. But primarily, what she wanted to increase was the accuracy of the books by having an automated system tell her on a monthly basis if there was anything that didn't tie out or didn't balance. That makes sense? Good. Actually, at this point, I'd like to throw another poll while I hydrate myself, um, just to get people a little bit active again. And here's what the poll suggests. What's the one thing that's taking the most of your time specifically right now? I have some options there, some of them which we talked about, like journal entries, reconciliation. Is it email? Is it admin? Is it like building proposals? Is it building reports? Or if it's other, you're free to put it in the chat. Let's just have a little bit of a conversation. Chasing clients for documents, email admin, building reports, excellent. So it's quite balanced from what I can tell here. Let me see the chat, see if we have anything else going on there. Lee says, I feel I need a 2 full-day bootcamp to do a basic connection. It's interesting. I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by it. For the purposes of this presentation, just showing what's possible. But I think once you get in and just build your first one, you really start to get your head around it. And because some of these tools, I don't want to suggest they're trivial to use, but because they're visual, it's not like you have to like be a programmer or a coder. And what I found personally is that accountants are very like, most of them at least, are very process minded. So they can like on their mind say, okay, if I get all the clients and I get all the accounts for each client, and then I filter the accounts so that I only get the bank accounts, and then like you can almost like in your mind, in natural English language, say, hey, if these steps were true, I could automate this process and start to get your head around that and try to pull that up on your end. You have questions in the other panel as well, Isaac and hi. Perfect. I appreciate that because I did wanted to mix it up a little bit before we keep going with the use cases. Love to see. Looks like we have chasing clients for documents as number 1, manual data entries as number 2, email admin and meetings at number 3. Excellent. All right. Let's see if we can answer some questions. I'll answer 1 or 2, and then I'll come back. And let's answer them from the one that was asked first. Okay, you're hard to hear. That I think we fixed that already. Can we have these workflows? It's too small to read. Yes, you can. If you go to the resources section, you should be able to find the PDF version. Or if that doesn't have all the details, or if you feel it doesn't have good resolution, feel free to email me at isaac@opzer.com. I'm happy to send you the images separately. Do you have any automation tools similar to Works that enters information from tax document into tax software that does not outsource the client information? Great question, Kaylee. When you're working with tax software in particular, one of the challenges is that some of these tools like Zapier or Make that was shown work primarily with apps that work on the cloud, apps that you can use in a browser. However, there's other types of automation tools, Power Automate being one of the most popular one, and in particular, Power Automate Desktop that you could build an automation that allows you to pull the data in from a text document and into a text software. I believe there are other services similar to the ones you've mentioned that might have like an off-the-shelf solution. But in the world we live in, we're traditionally more like building custom automations, which is the title of today's presentation, by the way. All right, so let's keep going with our presentation here. We have 4 more workflows or use cases to walk through. So let's talk about quick win number 4. New tax client sending the questionnaire. Relatively simple one, but the problem here is that when the clients sign up, let's just say they just sign up for your tax services, they signed the proposal, they paid, and then crickets. They're left waiting for the next steps. So there's nothing that comes from your firm automatically at that point. You have to like manually send the questionnaire after they sign up. Now they're busy, now they're with other things, they're running a business, so they might be a while while they get back to you. Whereas maybe if you had catched them right around that moment where they sign up and immediately tell them, hey, thanks for signing up. This is the links you can go in to start giving us the documents and information you need. Maybe they would have started right there and you would have had those documents much earlier before the crunch, a deadline. So the solution here is, a little bit of surprise, an automated workflow that when the proposal is signed, whether it is an Ignition or an Anchor or another tool, or if you're using some other trigger that would indicate that the client has decided to work with you again, or has renewed their contract and their interest, you send that client a request right away, whether it is within Soroban contents near, is custom form builder that you've built, whatever it is. And this is an example, in this case in Zapier, of what the automation looks like. The steps I want to highlight, of course, in this case are the first one, which is the trigger. Here's where a proposal is created within Ignition. And at the very bottom, there are some other things we're doing in other systems, but at the very bottom, you can see that we're creating that client and creating that request and sending that through. All right, long win number 4, bad coding finder. Let's talk about it. What's the problem? Your team might be coding or categorizing the same vendor into multiple accounts. And in some cases, this is a very easy and very rule-based way to find transactions that have been coded the wrong way. I know many firms that as a review process, they download like the general ledger of the client, they organize it by vendor, and then they look at to see if there are vendors that have been coded on multiple accounts. I also know tools that are, file review tools that literally part of what they do is tell you, hey, this Amazon vendor has been coded 97% of the time on this account, and telling you that, hey, it's been coded on different accounts as well. I'm sure some of you might be familiar with that process. Solution. Here, again, an automated workflow that's getting all the clients, getting all their transactions, and comparing to see if the same vendor has been coded into multiple accounts. Then it's summarizing all that information for you and pushing it to your favorite system, which could be Financial Sets, if that's what you're using, could be ClickUp, could be insert your tool of choice. For this particular firm, it was a ClickUp, what they were using, and this is just a screenshot of the output at the end. So this firm wakes up on the 7th, on the 10th, on the 15th, pick your day of the month, and they see for, let's just say, for the 100 clients they have, there are 13 that have maybe 3 to 5 vendors that have been coded differently. And this is done in a way where now the bookkeeper or the person assigned can come in and say, oh, I see the deposit has been coded in rental income and also in gain and loss on sale of assets. Maybe that doesn't matter. That's normal for that to be in those 2. But I can see Exxon has been coded in automobile. It makes sense. but supplies that maybe doesn't make sense. And now they can go ahead and correct that fundamentally. And this is what the automation looks like. Again, a little bit of a longer automation. I'll split it up. I split it here in two sections. The first at the top, what we're looking at is essentially, let me highlight here. We're getting the clients. You're seeing a pattern, right? We have to get the clients so we know for which clients we're going to do this for. And then we're getting all the bank accounts for those clients. You might notice a couple of other things that we have here. Here it says repeat as needed and getting 100 transactions at a time. From a technical standpoint, this may be a little too detailed, but I'll tell you anyway. Just like when you go to maybe QuickBooks and you go to the reconcile screen, if there are a million transactions, you're not gonna see them all. You have to like go through pages to see them all. In the same way, sometimes these tools, if there's a lot of data, they're not gonna give you all that data at once because that's a little bit heavy for them. So that's why you see here that we're getting the transactions so that we know how many times we have to go through this process to get 100 transactions at a time, right? It's like reading each page and then bundling them all up at this point. And then from there, a little bit of automation magic to say, hey, of all those transactions, I have the codes for the vendors. Please split that up so I can see the vendors and see if they're coded into more than one account. And if that's the case, allow the automation to continue to go through and ultimately create a task that just looks just like the one we shared before. So again, this firm has that process to ensure that their bookkeepers and their team are making sure that vendors are being coded correctly and raising that up without having to go into each individual file, but just knowing, because it's going to their systems, which clients need that looked into and for which specific vendors. All right, we are 2 use cases away from wrapping up. Let me see if I can wrap up in 3 minutes. I can answer some of the questions, which I assume there are quite a few of them. So questionnaire completed to the prepare being ready and uploading the files. This is something we commonly see as well. If the client's provided certain information, certain documents, you want to make sure you just centralize that and organize that in a way that your staff can act on quickly. You don't want them to be like on email, seeing like what the client provided in several different threads, and you want to make sure they don't have to go a ton of places to look for their information so they can prepare the return efficiently. So in this case, we build a simple automation that when the questionnaire is completed, we create the job, we organize all the information into a beautiful PDF, we upload all those documents into OneDrive or Dropbox or your file management of choice, and then we notify both the admin to know that that's ready and the client as well. And this is what that automation looks like, where you can see, in this case, when all the fields are completed for a content names request, which is a document request tool, we are creating a summary of that document, uploading that, along with all the documents that came up. We started a workflow run the process tree, which was what this particular firm was using. And then we're emailing the appropriate people for them to know, both the admin and the client, for the client to know, hey, client, we're going to start working on your return and it should be ready in X amount of time. Last but not least, we have a financial statement AI reviewer. What's the problem we're trying to solve here? There are sometimes issues that could be catched by looking at financial statements that maybe your junior or mid-level talent are missing regularly. And seniors have to step in to give that individual feedback and individual training that possibly, and we've seen it happen, AI could be given that feedback instead, saving the seniors time and teaching the juniors in the process. So the solution here is installing an AI layer of review so that before the seniors have to do the last check, we have an automated workflow that's pulling financials, is passing them through ChatGPT, similar to the uncoded categorization sections that we saw, and then telling us, hey, these are the issues that we're seeing based on the prompt and the best practices for that firm, and creating those tasks for the team to review. So as we said, juniors can catch those issues without the seniors or partners being involved. This is an example of like the result of what that looks like. In this case, similar to the ClickUp example, we're creating this in teamwork because that's what the firm was working on. And you can see one section for positive findings, and then we have one individual section for each negative thing that it found. Examples might include distributions exceeded net income. That's something that we should look into. There's these accounts like retained earnings or accrued retirement that didn't change, where maybe they should have changed. We also have accounts that change, but maybe shouldn't have. Where utilities, we have a missing expense because we have 100 months, $100 in the prior month, and we have zero in the current month. And this is just what the automation looks like. Where in this particular case, where this firm was using SIFT Analytics, other reporting tool, pushing that report on a scheduled basis for each client, running it through ChatGPT, and then essentially creating that workflow, that task list that you're seeing for each client every 15 of the month. So again, as we've mentioned before, every 15 of the month, she wakes up, and for all her clients, she just go into routine work and see what other issues she might have to look at further. All right. Perfect. So I guess summary of what we saw today, again, to start to get you thinking about what's possible. And for those of you interested in AI and automation readiness quiz to see how ready you are to take advantage of AI and automation, we have a quiz on our website. If you go to opzer.co/quiz or scan the QR code in the screen, you answer just 10 quick questions, and we'll give you a score from 0 to 100 on how ready your firm is to adopt AI and automation today, and give you instructions as to what you might want to do to be more ready today. All right, let's go into the Q&A section. Sarah, good to see you on here. I know you are a regular in the Automation Town sessions, so appreciate you. Let's see if I can answer some questions before 5 comes in. The problem I have with these automations in Zapier is that language used for specific actions might as well be Greek. Even when using AI to help, it's tedious and overwhelming. How would you recommend a casual user to do this easier? Honestly, I don't know if there's a good answer, if I have a good answer, other than started with simple use cases. Because it's definitely one of those tools that it's not as intimidating as people think, but you have to get in and start to see what's possible and start to test things out one thing at a time. If you're trying to do a super complex thing of like the ones we talked about today, maybe that wouldn't be a kind of easy way into it for you to be able to do, kind of get your head around those tools. If you had to choose your top 5 automation tools, which would they be? Excellent question. Zapier, Make, Power Automate, Airtable, and another tool that's not as popular, but it's called Axiom.ai. That's AXIOM. That we use a lot for several use cases that wouldn't be possible with the other ones. Is there an automation tool better than Zapier? From our experience, Make is probably on par, although transparently, because of the apps Zapier supports, we find ourselves 50, 60, 65% of the time recommending Zapier. It's kind of like on a kind of one-by-one basis, essentially. Depending on the tools you currently have, you can make that assessment to see if those tools are supported by by either Zapier or Make or whatever automation tool you decide. How do you personally troubleshoot with something in this flow breaks? Great question, because that can happen. When something breaks, more often than not, the beauty is that you're able to see the log or the run and go into the particular step that failed. That will start to give you some insights. Sometimes it will literally tell you what the error is, whether it is we try to create a folder, but we don't have access to that folder, parent folder, and that gives you insight into that. If it doesn't tell you exactly, that's where there's a little bit of engineering that has to go into taking a deeper look there. Do we have more time for questions? Dotun, I'll keep going. You guys will stop me when I have to stop. How do you use all these different AI tools while also making sure that client data is private and secure? Some of these workflows go through several programs. And do you consider the scrape selling of data part of the cost of doing business? Great question. Security is always a concern for firms, and you want to make sure the tools you're limiting the tools you're using. Number one, sometimes that's not possible. You have to use several. But being sure, I mean, the thing that I've learned over time is that, and we work with several firms that have highly diligent IT security teams, it's being clear on what's the data flow. So you know what tools that data is touching, that you're doing the diligence for each of those tools. And the other thing I like to say is that ultimately there's a level of risk tolerance, right? Ultimately, a cybersecurity professional is the risk manager, right? There's some risk associated with any tool, and there's a reward. So what's kind of the risk adjusted reward, and does it make sense to gain this efficiency and add an additional tool in your tech stack to be able to accomplish that? I'm a solo firm that just hired a part-time bookkeeper. Is it possible to juggle client meetings, onboarding clients, the work itself, and building automations? Possibly. We've seen definitely some solo firms that take on that hat as well. Um, it will depend on, I guess, your inclination to technology. If that's like something you're comfortable with, then by all means. For some firms, they might choose to say, "Hey, I'm going to focus on selling clients, and I'm going to, move on, and let someone like a professional handle this for me." All right, so I've been told by the team here that I need to start wrapping up. Sorry, wasn't able to get to all your questions. Please give me some feedback if you have any. There's a feedback matters little icon, so we'd appreciate knowing what you would have rather seen. A little bit more examples, a little bit simpler examples, some life builds. How was it? 1 of 5 stars. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for all that have saying thank you there on the chat. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to see you in the next one. All right, take care.